Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we got a banger of a video for you guys as well. Dark Fae is out, and if you're not familiar with her, she's one of the better bosses in Doom Tower to farm, because if you like Savage, and Savage being one of the better sets for nukers in-game, whether that's Arena, in PvP, or even in some PvE aspects on like some of your big nukers like Seer, for example, this set is for you. And the reason why is that it's not only a Savage set, but it's a Savage set that gives you a little bit more too on top of that in terms of your stats. So if you want to get maybe a little more crit damage because of the fact that you have that extra crit rate in the set bonus itself, it's a very, very ideal piece to get. It's probably the better inside of things. With that being said, there's a lot of nuance behind this boss. So without further ado, let's get into it. So before we get into the fight and show you guys how I approach handling it, I am farming right now currently. It's only one that's available because we have to wait for time to progress through Doom Tower with keys, is the first level of Dark Fae. So roughly, if you've been active in Doom Tower hard and you're slowly progressing throughout the week, or even in normal for that matter, you should eventually hit Dark Fae. Dark Fae has an interesting mechanic where she creates shadow copies of yourself, kind of like Naruto, for example. And you really have to kind of fight against yourself, like I said before. One of the ways I've learned to identify, and we're going to showcase it today, is using turn meter manipulation to advance your team while bringing the enemy team down, to give yourself enough time to not only clear the fight, but also go against Dark Fae herself to get eventually a win. Now, in my experiences, I have had opportunities where I try to keep my team not as tanky as possible, because you're going to go against tanky if you bring tanky, but pretty high-end nukers with a little bit of turn meter boosting from certain key characters, as well as turn meter manipulation, where that's removing turn meter through Cold Heart, for example, which I don't know if you see her. She's going to be in our showcase today. The main key thing that I feel like is important for Dark Fae is not only being able to keep the boss from having a turn, so you don't have to deal with more shadow versions of yourself, but also to give yourself just enough ample amount of damage to eventually progress and kill her before she becomes too much of a problem. In today's example, I wanted to use a couple champions that I don't get to use very often, like Morgan, for example. In tandem with like some very commonly well-known champions that are good for turn meter manipulation, like Allure, who has one of the best A1 turn meter manipulators in the game, and Cold Heart with her Heartseeker ability on her A3, giving you not only maximum enemy HP damage, but also it removes turn meter from the enemy that's hit by it. And then I wanted to add one more champion that was specifically accessible to almost everybody. So eventually down the road, whenever you're logging in daily, you'll hit Vizix. And Vizix, to me, was a key component where not only her A1, which does the turn meter manipulation, the A2 with the decreased speed, which is an important buff, or debuff, excuse me, against the boss, but also provoke. So you got to remember, when you're going against a boss, you have to deal with 2 waves and then the boss fight itself, which also has, in a summary words, a shadow wave of yourself. So the way that I designed this team was Ragash has control with his A2, which also brings decreased defense. So you got some damage output, some control that way. Vizix with her A3 brings a provoke, a little bit more control that way. So at the very least, when you're going against these waves, you're able to control them, giving your team time to get overcome them, and then of course control the boss as you progress through the fight. We're gonna get into a run here. I'm gonna go ahead and we'll talk about it as I go along. But all right, some key components here about how this team is designed. Right now, I have Ragash and Vizix being the main controllers of the waves. So Ragash is gonna open up with his A3, giving us a lot of opportunity to kind of beat down the opponent, like the enemies, as we get our turn meter and block them out with this A2. The stun is incredible. Decreased defense, incredible. One of my more personal preferences in terms of like decreased defense champion. It gives you a little bit more on top of that. With this wave 2, we have Vizix kicking in. Now we are limiting everybody else's abilities, but we are opening up with Vizix's control through her A3, the provoke, which is practically guaranteed. I mean, it's very, very effective. This gives us at least one turn. Now, if we get turn meter control from Vizix's A1 or Allure's A1 or even a Heartseeker here and there, then that'd be great. But we are limiting some of the abilities, so it's mostly going to be the A1s. You're going to see Ragash and Morrigan and Cold Heart and all the rest of the teams are going to start using just mostly their default skill, their A1, so they're just going to be auto-attacking through the waves. And now at this point, with whatever else we have left over, because we had that one extra turn where they were just provoked, we had that little bit of time to start whittling down the waves. We're going into the next part of the fight, which is going to be the boss fight, with practically full cooldowns. No, there's nothing that's off or unavailable going into this next wave, and that's going to be pretty important because we want to make sure that the shadows that we deal with, basically the copies of our team, is managed ideally. So, you know, we're going to try to get Ragash, and Velocimancy is going to go off first, bringing their Terminator down, giving us some control. We're going to open up with A2 and Allure, and then followed by that, we're going to have the A2, which smacks. It's very, very strong. Right here alone, just with that, we had full control. So now it's our turn to kind of get back into play. If we can get this shadow copy of Coldheart out of play really, really quickly, that'll give us an opportunity to focus on the boss primarily. And it's all about Terminator control at this point. So, you know, just continuous A1s from Allure and our Vizix, which is something that's a little underrated in my opinion, and then followed up with Heartseeker every now and then whenever Coldheart rotates into her turn. But if we can keep 100% downtime on the turn meter for the Dark Fate boss, it's just a matter of spank and tank at this point. Just going down the road, keeping her turn meter reduced, keeping the boss managed in terms of turn meter, getting increased speed, which is another underrated factor about Ragash. Just keeping the boss down. Don't give him a turn. Decrease speeds at play now. So now hopefully with everybody else, turn meter reduction from Velocimancy and increased speed from our side as well with the turn meter control. It's just a matter of letting the rest of the team just slowly beat them down. And I won't lie, this is one of many ways you can kind of beat the boss down. There are various alternative measures. There's alternative champions, which we'll discuss later. But this is one way I wanted to showcase you using some champions that I don't get to showcase very often, like Morgan, for example, who, in my opinion, is like an upgraded version of Haikatoon, who is also viable in this type of environment. We're going to let this fast forward for a little bit, and we'll see towards the end of the fight how it performed. All right. So as you can see, as we got past the Shadow Waves and we're pretty much just only primarily dealing with the Dark Fae boss herself, we were able to just keep her from having a turn, which means that ultimately the amount of uptime we have on just focusing on the boss was pretty optimal. Now, some key things you need to keep in mind. I am running a Speed Lead Morgan, so that's 19% extra aura, as well as basically at least 3 to 4 turn meter manipulators, right? And one of the biggest ones being Allure and Vizix are pretty core for this, right? Now, there are alternative champions, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. So when speaking about turn meter manipulators, I'm going to talk about ones that can be somewhat difficult to get, but I also wanted to propose to you guys ones that are farmable, ones that are a little bit more accessible so that you guys have a better opportunity to get some kind of core component for a turn manipulator team to eventually beat Dark Fae, right? So I'm going to start off with the ones that I use, and we'll just kind of briefly explain over if you haven't already, you kind of already got to see the run, so you have an idea. But Allure, her A1 is pretty much the primary aspect of it, as long as you have your, your 100% crit rate, a decent amount of accuracy, and just make sure she just uses her A1 off cooldown, kind of like how you would use her in Fire Knight. She'll get the turn meter down as much as she can. So build her up as fast as possible, 100% crit, some accuracy, she'll smack, right? Additionally, we did use Vizix, who was a free champion, free to acquire. Her A1 is pretty much the core. We did get some value out of the A2 to give us a little bit more of a guaranteed decreased speed. And then earlier in the waves too as well, when we were using Provoke to kind of control that wave too. That was also idea as well. But primarily that turn meter reduction is what we're looking for, right? In addition to that, in terms of other champions, we also did use Cold Heart, which is a void rare that you can get your hands on. You see her everywhere, whether that's Fire Knight, whether that's, Spider in the earlier stages, maybe even in the later stages. I might be showing you guys something pretty interesting with her there that way. But enemy max HP, turn meter reduction by 100%, very, very valuable in terms of a turn meter manipulator with some pretty decent damage on it, right? Speaking of enemy max HP and turn meter reduction, we also have a uncommon champion in Armiger. Of course, the same concept. Turn meter crit will be reduced as long as it crits. Has accuracy very similar to like a Lure example. But in the event that, you have enough breathing room, you're like, okay, well, maybe I want to get a little bit more damage off. You can use the A2 for some enemy max HP damage, right? So some great options there in terms of turn meter manipulators. Now, in terms of turn meter boosters, of course, we could talk about, your staple champions that give you increased speed, such as like Arbiter would be a great choice, that increased boosting. And she does have a fail-safe in the event that, your team is kind of running, someone got hit a little bit more than they were expecting to, and they got down. So Revive, a turn meter booster, as well as another turn meter booster, which gives you a heal. Very big value there. The thing to be concerned about, though, is that what you are providing to your team is also what's being provided to the enemy team. So just keep that in mind when you're going from it. Also, in tandem with it from the high-level squads, we also have Lissandra, who's a great champion who provides you increased speed. And this is a great opportunity to segue to it. In terms of buffs and debuffs, increased speed, decreased speed, they're king. That's what makes this work for us. And then on top of that, you can add other components like decreased defense and weaken to give yourself a little bit more ample damage to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit more faster. But with that being said, increased turn meter, increased speed, decreased turn meter, that's everything you're looking for in a speed lead champion, no less, so even better. And then, of course, she follows up with it. So if I had to choose between like Lissandra or Morgan, for example, I'd probably go Lissandra because she has a little bit more extra turn meter manipulation on top of that. But with that being said, super valuable. Same thing with her as well, Morgan, the Velocimancer, like I told you earlier in the fights, increased speed, increased turn meter, decreased turn meter, everything you're looking for, decreased speed on the A1. And then in the event that you need a little bit of like control from whether that's the waves from the earlier parts of the fight, like the first wave, the second wave, or even the shadows that you deal with earlier, getting that true fear may give you that little bit of breathing room so that you don't take too much damage going into the fight. Great options there. I did want to show some other ones that I don't have, but I've actually referred to some other people in the community, and they gave me some examples themselves. Herndig, his A3 giving you a full deplete turn meter, weaken, HP burn, the A2 giving the decreased defense. So getting some damage in tandem with the fact that you're also able to manipulate the turn meter, right? So very, very optimal characters to give you that. And the main thing, and like I said before at the end of it all, is keeping your team going fast, giving them turn meter, while also reducing the turn meter of your enemy team that you're going against, basically the copies of yourself. And then add a little bit of control, a little bit of damage on top of that, and just nuke, and you'll see the victory that you're going for. If I miss a champion that you guys didn't get to see, or that you wanted more reference towards, feel free to put it in the comments below. My main goal is just to show you an idea or concept of the way that the fight can be handled, and some champions that would go along with it, some that are accessible, some that may be a little bit hard to acquire that you may have to get some RNG luck with shards. But at the end of the day, if you have a champion that does turn meter control in some capacity, he or she or it may be worthwhile to look into, maybe putting into your team. Anyways, put your comments, your suggestions, anything that you want to say down below, and we'll respond to it as best we can. As always, guys, feel free to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers. It helps us out tremendously. And with that being said, always remember, stay ascended.
So